or the climate changes that we're seeing all around the world. The bottom line is that if you look at the conversations about the galactic alignment, not the planetary alignment, there is no planetary alignment taking place. It's a galactic alignment. What you'll see is that there is a cycle that happens. We go up and below and up above, up and below the planetary or the galactic, if you will, alignment, similar to like there are years and months in a year and seasons in a year and dates in which we all are born, live, and die. Everything happens in the cycle, and I would submit, based upon the evidence, not upon just speculation, but the evidence suggests that this is another cycle, and our job is to pay attention to the cycle, and I believe what we're stepping into is probably the greatest cycle for humanity going forward. That's why we're seeing all of these trends that are trending up toward a better existence for humanity than we have over the past, say, 200 or, as the Mayans would say, 5,000 years. We're now trending up. And so there's some good things, and the evidence is overwhelming, but you have to be able to, you have to get out of linear thought in order to receive it. If you don't, what's going to happen is that there are going to be people who are going to be constantly throwing out information to make sure you stay fear-based because they have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. That they want it to kind of be like this because, quite frankly, they're getting over like fat cats. So it works for them, but it doesn't work for the rest of us. So here's an opportunity, probably something that a lot of people, even some of the religious organizations have talked about all their lives, that there would eventually be some kind of a change. Right. That the life that we've lived up to this point is unsustainable. Everybody and their brother knows this is unsustainable. So there has to be a cyclical shift, and that's what we're witnessing right now. We're fortunate enough to be alive to be able to witness this cyclical shift in humanity at this time, and it doesn't occur like boom. It goes like zoom. It happens, and you start seeing the things unfold as the time goes on. That's what I see as a reality of the December 21st date. We're going to see change, but it's a zoom change, not a boom.
I guess. Well, now go ahead and mention that the book is called "Welcome to a Cooler World."
Yes, Welcome to a Cooler World. It's all based around the trends and decisions that we've already made that are happening right now in the world that are shifting us into an entirely different direction. It's amazing. All you have to do is just pay attention. But the book is you can find out more about it at leadtheshift.com. Again, that's leadtheshift.com. And also you can get in contact with me and ask me about any of the stuff that's out there. And I tell you, like I said, I'm a J school grad. My job is just to follow the details, follow the information, and see where it leads.
That sounds perfect. Well, hang with us. We're going to take another brief break for 2 minutes and get on Bill Gladstone, and then we'll get into some other areas of this 2012.
Very cool.
Well, it's good to be back with you. We've got our second guest on, Bill Gladstone. He has a tremendous background. He's a Yale graduate and a graduate degree from Harvard, former instructor at Harvard, and he's a cultural anthropologist. He can put some sense to some of these trends and changes we're going through. And Chet's still with me, and between these two, journalists and a cultural anthropologist, we might make some sense of our crazy little world after all. At least I guess we will. I'm not certain, but I guess we've got a good shot at it. And Bill was also did a lot of work with Rod Serling, and that's a fascinating topic because as a kid, I always liked his later show and the reruns of The Twilight Zone. I enjoyed that, and just found him a guy well before his time, or
yes,
innovator. And Bill, where are you coming from? What part of the country are you in?
Well, I'm calling in from wonderful Cardiff by the Sea, California, just outside of San Diego, where the weather is reputedly the best weather in the continental United States. I believe it's true.
Yeah. I knew a girl I worked with at State Farm years ago, and she was in Houston, which, of course, I can understand not liking Houston, but she was pining away for San Diego. I mean, she was going to take a job. Well, she's a lawyer, but she'd have taken a job as a sonic car hop just to get back to San Diego. She would have. I'm sure she did. But Well, that's great. How did you come to run up against Rod Serling and work with him?
Well, I've had, I have to admit, a very blessed and fascinating life, and it's a little bit related to my novel, The 12, also. I did pattern the character in the novel after my own life. I was born into a publishing family, and I was groomed to run a publishing company. And along the way, I discovered that I was, I guess you would call gifted. I multiplied three-digit numbers in my head as a very small child and had extraordinary mathematical abilities, though I didn't speak till I was 6, and my parents actually thought I was retarded, which, you know, they didn't know anything different, and I didn't know the difference between being retarded and being brilliant, so it was all the same to me. But, you know, as I went to school, and, you know, I always was the top student and all that good stuff. And so when I got out of Yale, I was offered, you know, to run my father's publishing company, which wasn't really interesting to me because it was in the family. I'd actually worked in publishing since I was 6 years old. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't a challenge. It, you know, it was my father's company. It wasn't my company. And so I took a leave of absence from the position he had created for me in the editorial department, and I, you know, wrote some books. I wrote how to score high in the real estate exams, how to score high in the medical college admission test. I could really take any subject and, you know, figure it out, and, you know, these are kind of how-to books, not a big challenge. And I used to go to the YMCA. I was living in Westport, Connecticut at the time, and I would go to the Y, and I started playing paddleball. And it turned out that one of the people I was playing paddleball with was the producer for Rod Serling's In Search of Ancient Mysteries. We got to talking. He realized that I knew archaeology. I'd studied some archaeology at Yale, that I spoke several languages, including Spanish, and that I might be very useful as the researcher to help them put together the In Search of Ancient Mysteries television documentary. So I started doing that sort of just freelance, working mostly out of the Westport Library. And then suddenly he said, the whole thing's been accelerated. Some other project fell through. I need somebody to get on a plane and go down to Peru and do all the advanced work. You've already figured out where we're going to film. You speak Spanish. Can you go? I said, sure. Well, this was before we had computers. We didn't even have faxes. They, you know, they didn't have overnight even letters. But anyway, they got me a contract in which I've kept it because it was so touching, in which it said, William Gladstone is hired to search for ancient mysteries anywhere in the world that may take him. That was my job assignment. And, you know, I was 22 years old, and it was quite an assignment.
Boy, that does sound like a dream job. Yeah.
It was a dream job. I mean, I didn't even care about the money. As it was, you know, they paid me scale, which was like $150 a week. But they gave me a $300 a week meal money allowance, or I forget what they called it, but it was spending money.
Expense allowance.
And that was, you know, more than my salary. And, you know, part of it was because my job was to meet with these scientists and the head of museums and all kinds of strange people and, you know, get them to talk on camera, or see if we wanted them to talk on camera about the topic of that particular show was really Eric von Daniken in Search of Ancient Astronauts. And, you know, could it be that there had been alien contact in the past, and that would explain the Nazca lines and the pyramids and, you know, many other unexplained phenomena. And as the researcher, I actually went to over, 40 different museums throughout the world, probably looked at over 10 million objects. And of the 10 million, I only found 6 that one could hypothesize looked a little bit like ancient astronaut ships.
6 out of 10 million? Wow.
6 out of 10 million. So, you know, my own theory was, guys, you got a really good show here, but I'm not so sure it's about aliens. I think it's more about there's been intelligent life on this planet that has created some amazing things. I mean, I went to Machu Picchu. I went, you know, really, literally everywhere around the world. It was a dream job.
Chet and I were talking about. Chet and I were just talking about the same kind of thing, about the cycles, it seems, that we've been through, not just a linear path.
This is the point. That the real story was much more interesting than trying to say that everything great on this planet, you know, we receive from some alien civilization. I'm not totally debunking the possibility of intergalactic contact of some kind. There certainly is a probability that there is life, you know, throughout our universe, and that there is the probability that there's higher intelligence beings that may have found a way to communicate with people on Earth. I think that's possible, but we have no actual proof of that. And if we can find other explanations for some of the amazing technology and amazing feats, I think we should. And, when I went to Harvard, certainly we weren't, exploring the thesis of alien astronauts. We were exploring a lot of other theses. And
well, I guess, Chet and I talked about that too. It's not so much the evidentiary thing, it's just evidence in terms of witnesses, yes.
Right.
It's, I can't say I've not had any interplay with them or anything, but it's something, I guess I'm just, Chet's a journalist, and that's good, and you certainly have your academic background. I guess, I have some of my own, but what I'm saying is I'm more just an old investigator and salesman, and where there's smoke, there's fire, in a more prosaic sense. I think there's some validity.
Well, this led me in a strange way to the principal topic of tonight's talk, which is 12/21/2012 and the cycle and what it means. Because what happened, I actually, at Yale, I did not major in anthropology. I actually majored in Hispanic literature, read great books like 100 Years of Solitude and all the Latin American history and great things like that. That was one of the reasons I was so, appropriate to be hired to go to Peru and Ecuador and Colombia and, set up the filming. But when I got to Harvard, I was studying cultural anthropology. And as a cultural anthropologist, I was very, I always aced all these tests and things. So I won a National Institute of Mental Health 3-year scholarship, which included not just room and board and courses, but grants where every summer I could go anywhere in the world I wanted to do research. So it was, and this is a time, I guess, I don't know if they still are so abundant, and our economy's not doing as well as it was back then. But, it was really an amazing opportunity for a young man. And I did go, all over the world. I went to Brazil. I actually ended up doing a village study in Spain. I spent time in Mexico. And I also traveled, to India and Asia and Japan and, met with many, many wise elders, if you will, because I was focused mostly on indigenous cultures. And what I learned was that the Mayans had the most accurate calendar that this world has ever seen.
Right.
But that the Mayan belief in cycles was not unique to the Mayans at all.
Exactly.
That the belief in cycles is really part of every major civilization that we've studied. I mean, I'm talking about as disparate as the Hopi Indians here in North America,
right.
The Tibetans, the Hawaiians, certainly the Hindus with their belief in the Kala Yuga, very similar.
Now, wait a minute, guys.
Cycles.
You mean that the same basic cycle theory is through all these various civilizations?
All of these civilizations believe it. Now, the only one that has the precise date of December 21st, 2012 is the Mayans. But that's because the Mayans were really the only culture that had such good mathematics. In fact, the Mayan calendar, and there were 40 different calendars.
I'm sorry, Bill. Bill, can I run something? What we were talking about just earlier was just the fact that what we are experiencing now is a kind of an imposition of a linear thought that is particularly Western, that looks at cycles as a kind of an affront to its position, so it has to kind of demonize the whole idea that, there couldn't have been other civilizations that were as great as we are because we are the pinnacle of humankind up to this point. So that makes it easy to demonize, if you will, or even poo-poo the whole aspect of Mayan calendars.
Trivialize, that's what we've been experts at doing as an anthropologist.
Yeah.
We have the terminology hot and cold societies. Hot societies are societies like ours where the technology dominates and things move and there's heat. And then cold societies are, typically what used to be called primitive societies where, it's not so much about technology and people may live for hundreds of years without any quote-unquote progress. Well, it really is a Western conceit that we have progress. It's where you put your value and your attention. The reality is, when I visited Chiapas, which is the home of the majority of the people that still are genetically Mayan, I visited, and it's also where Azapa, where they have the oldest actual stelae of the Mayan calendar itself, though it's been moved to museums, but it's where they found the oldest relics. And I went up into the mountains about 25, 30 miles outside of Zappa, the coastal area, where it's really much too hot to live comfortably without the conveniences that we have today. But when you went up into the mountains, think of Hawaii, but 10 times more intense. the animals 10 times bigger, the trees 10 times bigger. And you have an environment in which clearly people could have supported themselves working at most an hour or two a day, and where shelter would not need to be stone. It could be very light